5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It's how I roll, a shooting star in a film noir. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground. I'm floating around 10 feet on the ground.
Hey folks, it's John Baranchuk here. Another Monday of Grasping Sasquatch, Stories and Science. Thanks to all that are returning, and thanks to any new folks listening for the first time. Couple special thanks need to go out. One, boy, that opening music and this backdrop and stage for my show is just awesome, I think. And Doug Hychek deserves a lot of the credit for that, and Alex Hychek deserves a lot of the credit for that, putting that all together and helping me learn the ropes. So I want to thank them. Hello to Hair Force. Some of you may not know that I taught at a university down in Mexico, and one of my research assistants down there, her name is Carolina Puerto Casanova, and I just wanted to give a shout out to her. Great person, was a great supporter, and continues to be a great supporter. I guess most of you know that I'm a retired psychologist and an author, and now a budding podcaster. We certainly appreciate if you both subscribe and hit notifications so you can be notified of my show every week and all the other awesome shows on the Untold Radio Network. If you're a Bigfoot fan, we've got some really good ones there that you need to check out. As is usual, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions as we go through the presentation. Type them in all caps. If you just want to chat amongst yourself, that's great. Keep that in lowercase. I'm a one-man band here, and so the all caps questions helps catch my eye when I remember to look at the chat. We're going to continue on with Fight Flight presentation. This is episode 4 of Fight Flight. And in the previous episodes, we defined fight flight, looked conceptually at the importance of scientific research, and fight flight helps with our objectivity if we learn to modulate and control our fight flight. It's thought to be under involuntary control, but the purpose of this series is to help people realize and learn how they can control and modulate and reprogram your fight flight response. To that end, in the last show, we began working on relaxation training. We've still got one relaxation training technique that I'm going to review today. And I'll just emphasize again that relaxation training is the most important aspect if you want to reprogram your fight-flight response, or if you have leftover stress from an encounter. It's one of the most important things in dealing with that leftover stress. So you can't practice that enough if you're going to reprogram your fight-flight response voluntarily. Today, we'll also begin to dabble in guided imagery. You'll notice the red line. Stress inoculation, self-hypnosis, and neuro-linguistic programming swish techniques are all actual reprogramming, neuropsychologic reprogramming techniques. Guided imagery begins to fade into that, as you'll see today. We've gone over pursed lip breathing, autogenic relaxation, and today we're going to hit progressive relaxation and see how far we get before we move into guided imagery, hopefully today. As is the format of the show, I typically tell a story, a topical story based on what the show is based on. And today is still about fight-flight, so I'm going to tell another fight-flight story. I'm starting to run out of them. Hey, Craig. Hey, Sumati. Thank you for attending. The story starts with my very first expedition. And in last week's story, I talked with you guys about this camping area that had a point going out, and you could look out over the valley. And next to this point was a feed plot of endive for the animals. And if you look down into the valley from that feed plot, you could see what I would call a Bigfoot highway running all the way down to the river and all the way back up to the top of the mountain on the other side of the valley. And again, this story, that location again, figures largely in my story tonight. I've already shared that on that first night, I heard my first Bigfoot howl over a bunch of coyotes going off, and then the Bigfoot howled above the coyotes. So that Bigfoot howl, though, was across the river from where we were. So as is our custom, when we got back to camp, we kicked around our experiences a little bit, and the next morning we debriefed on those experiences. And it was decided that night, a team of 4 would go out, leave base camp, and drive, it must have been 15, 20 miles to get to the other side of the river and hike down towards the river to see if they could make any contact with that Bigfoot that roared. So a guy by the name of Glenn Williams, a good friend by the name of John Eves, may he rest in peace, and 2 other what our group leader, expedition leader, would call newbies. 2 folks that were on their first expedition. So that was the group of 4. And they had a pretty good hike through the woods and came out at a meadow. And in the distance in the meadow, you could see where the final path down to the river started. And right at the beginning of this path, the trees were kind of bent and formed into an arch, almost like an arch in many churches. And if you're familiar with Bigfoots, you know that this is sometimes something that they do. So I do need to say, I was not a member of this group. The story I'm telling you is secondhand, not a firsthand personal account of mine. But I did interview all the, not even interview, it was just talking about their experience that I'm about to tell you. So they stood at the head of the path down to the river, noticing the trees arching over them. And that arching kind of continued on down the path so that there were no branches below 15 feet on either side of the path. As they began walking down, it was the two most experienced guys, Glenn and John, taking the lead. And it was the two newbies, and I'm sorry I don't remember their name, following behind. So they get a few hundred yards down the trail, still got a good hike to get down to the river. And one of the new expeditioners says, "Guys, hold on a second. I think I've got a nosebleed." So they stop walking. The guy checks his nose, looks with his light. Yeah, he's got a nosebleed. No big deal. Sometimes I get them. No big deal. So let's go on. They keep going on. Probably another 25, 50 yards on down the trail. The same young man says, "Guys, we got to stop. I'm losing feeling in my arm. I can't move my arm." And they gather around, they look at his arm. He's saying it's numb, he can't feel it. When they look at his arm is such that all the hairs on his arm are standing at attention. If you've ever put your arm in an electrostatic field, all the hairs on that arm will stand vertically at attention. And that's what the hair on his entire arm looked like. And he said, "Boy, I'm concerned. I think I might be getting zapped." And in future episodes, we'll talk about zapping and discuss that phenomena some. But to continue on with the story, he says, "I don't think I want to go any further. This is too much for me." And the rule of thumb is you never leave somebody in the woods by themselves when you're on a Bigfoot expedition. So the other new guy stayed back with the young man who was, at this point, had a bleeding nose and what seemed almost like a paralyzed arm. He had no control over his arm. And as they were walking down the path, all four of them, on occasion, they might find some nuts or a little pebble kind of being thrown at them, landing at their feet. And again, many of you probably know that's often characteristic of a Bigfoot behavior. So as the two experienced guys walked forward, they continued to have pebbles landing at their feet. The pebbles seemed, however, to be coming at a higher velocity. And they both looked at each other, said, we've been here, done this, we're going to move forward. So as they continued to move down the trail, adding to the pebbles were pine cones and some nuts that had fallen on the ground. And now these were coming at an even higher velocity, and they were starting to hit John and Glenn. Obviously, arguably a deterrent as they were headed down towards the river. These guys had both been doing this for a long, long time. In fact, John Eves was the behind-the-scenes Sasquatch guide for season 1, episode 1 of Finding Bigfoot, and Glenn was the behind-the-scenes Bigfoot guide for season 1. I believe it was episode 25. Glenn, I'm sorry if I'm misquoting what show you were involved in. The point here is these guys had been doing this a long time, knew what they were doing, knew their stuff. But as they kept on walking, they continued to be pelted by pine cones, nuts, and occasionally now smaller rocks. Initially, it was just landing on their feet, then hitting their feet and their legs. But at this point, it was starting to hit their upper torso. And they were starting to get frustrated with this. So, knowing better, nonetheless, they began throwing things back. And this is not something you want to do in retaliation or as a provocation. Tree knocks, whoops, howls, stone clacks, those kinds of things will oftentimes provoke some Bigfoot behavior. But when Bigfoot's throwing something at you, or Sasquatch is throwing something at you, it's generally ill-advised for you to throw back, because that's just going to provoke more of the same. And in fact, that's what happened. As they continued on down the path, more things started throwing, more pine cones, rocks, pebbles started being thrown at them, and they started to be intermittently pelted by them. But they had both been here and done that before, so they were undeterred. They kept on moving forward. And as they moved forward, John Eves was the first one to have an experience. When I talked with him and he told me about his experience, what he told me, he asked me, he said, "John, have you ever been in a fight and you get punched in the stomach and it feels like the person's fist goes up under your ribs when they punch you?" There was nothing standing in front of us, but all of a sudden that happened to me. I got punched in the stomach and I could feel the fist going up under my ribs. I immediately doubled over and started projectile vomiting. He continued to vomit for a while and decided, no, I've had enough. Clearly, they don't want us coming down here. That's enough for me. Glenn, God bless him, said, we've both been here and done this before. I want to get to the bottom of this. I'm moving forward. So he continues to move towards the river. And I don't know how many yards, 50 to 100 yards later, as John is on his hands and knees, still dealing with nausea and vomiting, Glenn tells me this is what happened to him. John, I was just walking down the path, nothing that I could see in front of me. And all of a sudden, it was like someone was standing right in front of me with a baseball bat, and they took a home run swing and hit me on my chest with this baseball bat. And I went down flat onto my butt and down on the ground from the impact of this bat-like sensation hitting him. And when that happened, all hell broke loose. He said he didn't know, 25 to 50 yards in front of him, it sounded like a telephone pole was being wrenched up out of the ground or split out of the ground. Doug, in some of his shows most recently, has been talking about what they're calling a thunder knock. And interestingly enough, Glenn's description of this kind of fits that. He said that as it was pulled or twisted out of the ground, it had this tearing kind of sensation. It felt like the tree was being torn into pieces or torn out of the ground. And when the quote tree knock, of course, there's a debate of whether they're knocking a tree or whether they're doing something else. When the tree knock happened, it was like a major explosion. Just a tree knock so loud and so intense, he could feel the sound waves washing over him, even as he's still on the ground trying to get up, and he feels the sound waves washing over him. So far, his fight physiologic reactions were kicking in, but between the baseball bat to the chest, even though there was no one in front of him, and that thunder knock, he said, the heck with this, I'm getting out of there. So two of the group members had a FLIR, and two of the group members had a parabolic microphone. So he starts backing up quickly with his FLIR, looking to see if he can capture a Bigfoot on film, making all this racket, because at this point, again, all hell broke loose, and he was being pelted by pebbles, nuts, pine cones, and some pretty good-sized stones. So he hightails it back to John. He says, let's get the heck out of here. And so they start going back up the path, and the pelting is continuing. So they stand back to back to each other and start going up the path and kind of spinning around to try and pick up or catch whatever was doing this to them. They eventually met the two new expeditioners, and they formed, if you've ever seen one of these war movies where the heroes are surrounded by the enemy, and they put their backs together, back to back, and they start shooting and tearing up the enemy. Well, these guys didn't have any guns, but they had FLIRs and parabolic mics. So all four of them are kind of back to back in a circle, and they've got their hands out with their FLIRs and their parabolic mics trying to capture all this, and they just start rotating in a circle, as they're scurrying as fast as they can up this path. And as they get to the head of the path where they started, where the arch started, there was a gigantic boulder there. They said it was about the size of a small Volkswagen. That absolutely was not there when they headed down the path to begin with. But they didn't have time to dilly-dally or think about it because they were still being pelted. And so at the point that they got to the head of the path, they broke form, they broke their back-to-back circle and bolted across the meadow that was there and just made a quick retreat back to the top of the mountain where they had parked. When these guys came into camp, they looked white as a ghost. John was still holding his stomach. Glenn was still holding his chest. And the two newer guys, they just wanted to go to bed and go to sleep because this was more than they could handle. So that retreat is a definite fight-flight experience. Their hearts were racing, the adrenaline surging through them. I'm sure their eyes, even though it was night, were dilated even bigger than usual because of the stress and the anxiety and fear that they were experiencing. Again, in fight-flight, we hold on to our bladder, we hold on our urine, we hold on to our feces. And by the time they got back to camp, they had to use the bathroom because, as we've talked about, the sympathetic division of the nervous system is the on switch or the excitatory switch. And that's what was getting thrown when they had this experience. The off switch is the parasympathetic division of the autonomic or automatic nervous system, if you will. And that's the calming response. So it was the next day when they told me this story. That's just one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard on an expedition from people whose accounts I trust and value. These guys weren't the types of folks to make things up. Although, interestingly enough, John, bless his heart, if you wanted to have a Bigfoot encounter, you went with John because it seemed more often than not he had some kind of experience. And you probably, if you're in a research group or you know people, there are some people who just seem to consistently have experiences, almost like the Bigfoots are drawn towards them. And so, what an awesome experience. What a frightening experience. I get kind of goosebumps just kind of telling this story because it's just the intensity of what these guys experienced was incredible. So before we move on to kind of the scientific or educational part of my talk tonight, anybody have any questions about the story or about their experience? Because it was something. It was something. I'm seeing Charlotte J, Tea Time with Tiffany, all in the chat that I can see. I'm sure there are other viewers using other channels that I can't see. I appreciate you. I wish I could call you out, acknowledge your support, but I don't know who you are. So, any questions about the story? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we're going to move on to the educational or the learning or exploring portion of the show. And as I noted earlier, I'm going to be teaching you through this relaxation, guided imagery, stress inoculation, systematic desensitization, self-hypnosis, and neurolinguistic programming. Sumati, I just said that you saw that you asked about the location. I can't tell you the location of that event because it was an organized expedition and I signed a non-disclosure agreement, which really focuses primarily on the locations because it's a valued location. Jenky 1040, no, you're not blocked. I see you there, bud. So last week we went over pursed lip breathing and autogenic relaxation. Pursed lip breathing, forming a tight little O with your lips, and as you exhale, exhaling through pursed lips so that your exhale is at twice as long or longer than your inhale. Autogenic relaxation. Now I'm relaxing my right arm, feeling more calm, feeling more peace. Right arm 4 to 8 times on the right arm, 4 to 8 times on the left arm, 4 to 8 times on the right leg, 4 to 8 times on the left leg, 1 to 3 times both arms, 1 to 3 times both legs. It wasn't put up as a comment, but I do have to feel the need to respond to Steve's former everything comment. He's saying you can't reprogram fear or PTSD, but time can. No, not sure, so tell me how. Fear was not from Bigfoot. Well, Steve, before I was medically retired, I worked for the Department of Veterans Administration Hospital, an outreach clinic in Rome, Georgia. And the bulk of my clients were veterans that have PTSD. Now, some people can, using these techniques, get completely over PTSD. Some people can't. You're right. Time can help heal those wounds. But these techniques that I'm teaching you and talking about, reprogramming your fight-flight response, is the techniques that I use to help these folks with their PTSD. If these techniques would have been taught beforehand, likely their PTSD reactions or their fear reactions wouldn't have been as strong. And so, although I've been primarily talking about these techniques to reprogram your fight-flight response so you're less likely to crap your pants or pee your pants or have an extreme fear reaction. You can also use these techniques, and I did use these techniques with my PTSD patients to help desensitize them and reduce the stress and anxiety that is associated with their PTSD. Depending on the horror that you experienced from your PTSD, that has a lot to do with how far you might go towards healing. But I would encourage you to hang in there with me. And we're not going to get to it today, but in the next episode or the episode before, I'm going to be teaching you guys something called stress inoculation. It used to be called systematic desensitization. And this is a way to use relaxation to counteract the anxiety and the fear that comes from the PTSD or comes from the fight flight. So I disagree with you that you can't reprogram fear or reprogram PTSD. If you think about military training or police training, in fact, that's part of the training. They don't do it. They don't use these techniques necessarily, but they use repetition, simulating clearing houses, going into rooms, simulating war scenarios. And all this is being done to reduce your fear response, to reduce your anxiety response, and make you less likely to have a fight-flight reaction when the doo-doo hits the fan. So it can be reprogrammed. If you've got significant PTSD from a war scenario or for something particularly gory, you can become less emotionally reactive to it. That's what I did for a living. So today we're going to talk about progressive relaxation. And this is the relaxation technique that you use to get what's called a deep muscle relaxation. And basically in this technique, and again, you gotta practice these relaxation techniques and become an expert in relaxing before you ever move on to the reprogramming techniques that we're going to move into here in a little bit today, or maybe our next time together next Monday. If you can't get relaxed deeply and completely, you do not need to be moving on to the reprogramming techniques. Your relaxation needs to be powerful to counteract the fear and anxiety of either your fight-flight response or a PTSD kind of reaction. So, and I can't emphasize that enough. That's very, very important. So in terms of progressive relaxation, you either start at the top of your head, your scalp and forehead, or at your toes and ankles and feet. And you work your way either up your body, tensing certain muscle groups to the count of 7, and then letting go and relaxing them. Tensing them again to the count of 7, letting go and relaxing them. Noticing the difference between tensing and relaxing the muscles of your body and moving on to the next muscle group. So real quickly, if you're going to start at the top of your head, you're going to raise your eyebrows up to wrinkle your forehead muscles. You'll do that twice. So I'm going to ask you to raise or tighten the muscles of your forehead now to the count of 7, raising those eyebrows up to 2, 3, tightening them more to 4, 5, tightening them to 6, 7, and relax. Noticing that difference or change from when those muscles are tightening to those muscles letting go and relaxing. As I ask you once again now to tighten the muscles of your forehead now to the count of 7, raising those eyebrows up to 3, 4, keeping them tighter to 5, 6, 7, and let go and relax the muscles of your forehead, allowing the comforting relaxation to flow into those muscles. And that is the process. Again, I've got this step-by-step scripted out in my book, Psychological Horizons and Scientific Bigfoot Research, available on Amazon, but I'm already fixated on the new title, the new version, Grasping Sasquatch. So from your forehead muscles, you would follow that same procedure down to the muscles of your eyes and cheeks. You can close your eyes, clench your teeth, making your cheeks and jaw real tight to the count of 7, 2, 3, 4, bring them tighter to 5, 6, 7, and relax. Repeat again. And again, we would start this exercise, as I said before, as we start every relaxation exercise, by taking 3 deep breaths. Also, a word of warning to people that may have chronic pain. I've worked with this technique with people that have had neck fusions, upper and middle back fusions, and low back fusions. In general, I would, if you've had those kind of surgical procedures and you've already got tight muscles there, on one hand, this is probably the most important form of relaxation for you to do. But before you jump right into it, before you jump right into it, I'd encourage you to start with the autogenic techniques, just to get used to your body relaxing. I'm seeing that somebody posted a question and got deleted. Jenky, if you want to repost it in capital letters, I'll try and answer it, okay? So clenching your jaw, kind of smiling, exaggerated smile to get your cheeks, your jaw, and that'll pick up on your neck as well. When you get to your trapezii, you raise your shoulders up. So I'm asking you to tighten the muscles of your shoulders now to the count of 7, 2, 3, tighter to 4, 5, 6, 7, and relax. Repeat that again. And to finish my thought about people with surgical interventions, when you move on to this technique, what you want to do, you hear me saying, making them tighter and tighter and tighter. Don't crank down on them real hard like that. Just create enough tension that you can begin to notice the difference between the muscles are tighter and not as tight. Tighter, not as tight. As you continue to practice tighter and not as tight, it'll eventually be tighter and a little more relaxed. Tighter and a little more relaxed. There's something called muscle memory or tissue memory. And when your muscles stay tight a long time, that becomes the normal position for them. And so you want to re-educate, and that's what we're doing here. We're reteaching the muscles in our body the difference between tightness and relaxing. D. Mitchell, hey, how are you, sir? Nice to see you. Do we do anything with our breathing while contracting our muscles? You can, or you don't have to. Some people recommend when you tighten your muscles, taking that deep breath in, and then when you release them, allowing that relaxation and the air to flow out through pursed lip breathing. Oftentimes, I think in myself, I find that I don't necessarily even have to think about doing that consciously. That happens kind of on its own. When I tighten my shoulders, I kind of suck in and hold my breath. And when I release that tension after the count of 7, I let go and relax, and I relax my breath. So we're at our shoulders and neck, raising your shoulders up. From there, we go to your chest. I like doing the Arnold Schwarzenegger pose, kind of pushing your fist together in front of your chest, and that picks up and tightens the shoulders and neck, or chest. If you want to focus more on your upper back, you can roll your shoulders back. Next is stomach and lower back. The best way that I know of doing that is just pushing your abdominal muscles back towards your spine. And then next is your hips and buttocks. I call it the penny pinching technique, clenching your butt cheeks together as if you've got a penny that you're trying to hold on to between them. Again, to the count of 7, let go and relax. Again, to the count of 7, let go and relax. Next one are your thigh muscles. You can do that like I'm sitting in my chair with my feet on the ground, just by pressing down against the floor with my feet. I can activate both my quadriceps, which are the muscles on the top part of your thigh, and the hamstrings, which are on the back part of your thigh. You can also just straighten out your leg, and that will activate and tighten those muscles. So again, I'm going to ask you now to tighten the muscles of your thighs and hamstrings now to the count of 7, tightening to 2, 3, 4, even tighter to 5, 6, 7, and let go. Again, if tightening your muscles causes you pain or discomfort, don't tighten them as much. Just tighten a little bit so that you begin to re-educate the muscles between tightness and a little less tightness. We're reprogramming that tissue memory. We're reprogramming that muscle memory. Calves, I either point my toes up towards my head or point my toes straight in front of me to tighten my calf muscles. And then toe muscles, just curling your toes up into a tight little ball. Again, to the count of 7, let go and relax. Tighten again to the count of 7, let go and relax. And by the time you work through all these muscle groups, your body will be more relaxed. Excuse me while I take all that tightening's getting me sweating. A drink to cool down. After you get relaxed through this process, spend as much time as you want to enjoying that relaxation. When you're ready to get on with your day, if you start it at your head and worked your way down to your feet, I would start at your feet and work your way back up to your head allowing a refreshing and reviving energy to flow back into the muscles of your toes. Those muscles perhaps moving a little bit or moving your toes a little bit, experiencing a refreshing and reviving energy coming into the toes as it travels up through your ankles into the muscles of your calves, becoming more alert and aware, refreshed and revived, allowing that invigorating energy to flow from your calves into the muscles of your thighs and hamstrings, becoming more alert, refreshed, revived, allowing those muscles to move in a comfortable fashion, flowing up through your hips and buttocks into your lower back, becoming more and more alert and aware, refreshed and revived in the muscles becoming more pleasantly energized and awake, all the way up into the muscles of your lower back and upper back and chest, becoming more fully functioning, completely revived, energized, alert, and awake, all the way up into your neck and shoulders, your jaw, your cheeks, your eyes, your forehead. And you just take yourself in reverse order back up, talking about becoming more alert, aware, refreshed, revived, any words that are energizing, pleasantly energizing, or making you more alert and awake and aware. Now, if we had started at our toes, I'd suggest and worked our way up with the tensing and then letting go and relaxing, tensing and then letting go and relaxing till we reached our forehead. For the reviving or awakening portion of this procedure, you would start where you left off at your scalp and forehead and allow that refreshing and reviving and invigorating energy to flow back down through your body. So, any questions about that? I see that there's some interesting conversations going on. Eric, nice to see you. Thank you for toting the load and explaining some of this. Anybody have any questions about relaxation training, the three that we discussed, or for that matter, my comments about PTSD or fight flight? I'm certainly willing to entertain any of those. No? Okay. We've got, and well, I don't know, we've got some other experts in this, doing this stuff, Eric being one of them, D. Mitchell being another one. These guys know what they're talking about, and I appreciate them being here and their support. Moving back now onto the next slide. Now we're going to be talking about guided imagery. And we just got a few minutes. We're probably not going to get through all three of these. But once you've gotten relaxed, and this is where we begin to dabble in reprogramming some of our emotional and physical reactions using these techniques. Once you get deeply relaxed, or once you go through a relaxation exercise, you can, during that time that you're just laying there enjoying the relaxation, you can imagine yourself in a relaxing and peaceful place. I don't know where that might be for y'all. I like relaxing beside streams, on mountaintops, wherever the case may be. And as much as I'm saying do this when you're already relaxed, other practitioners of these techniques would argue that you can use this as the relaxation exercise itself. Take your 3 deep breaths. Imagine yourself in a pleasant place. Maybe for me, it might be leaning against a tree that's providing a cool shade in the heat of the day beside a stream. And I'm noticing the coolness on my forehead. I notice some water or sweat dripping down, and what a pleasant cooling effect it has. And as that flows down, that pleasant cooling and relaxing sensation flows down into my neck and into my shoulders. I enjoy the sound of the brook babbling beside me. Have you ever noticed how sometimes when a brook babbles, it almost sounds like it's talking to you? Maybe sending you some messages of relaxing or peace or calm. In particular, I like getting in a place of this shade where I can hold my arm out so that part of my arm is in the shade and part of my arm is in the sun. And in doing so, noticing the difference between the pleasant warmth and the pleasant coolness on my arm. And so it's just basically imagining yourself in a relaxing, peaceful place and focusing on all your senses and enjoying the sights, the sounds, the sensations, the smells, the tastes that go along with that relaxing place. And boy, time has flown by. We've got about 3 minutes left. Any quick questions before we I want to thank you all for attending and listening to my biases and propaganda, if you will. Bias is hardwired into our body, and we can't avoid it. But these are techniques that I have found helpful in helping others. So I'm going to ask you to return next week to continue to enjoy talking about some guided imagery techniques. And for now, I'm going to ask you to keep your mind open, your boots on the ground, and your heart with your higher power. Good evening, and thank you. I appreciate you all very much.
I see you running out of reason. Don't try to blame it on the seasons. Why you wanna walk away? When we began, swear we had something that would last. Baby, has the feeling passed? Falling in was easy. How do I make it stay? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Oh, I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Was I a fool? I know sometimes I may wander, but I would never leave asunder a thing as good as what we have. Is it a rule? What's good is worth the fighting. There ain't no denying that you and I were made to last. Falling in was easy. How can we make it stay? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and true. I will never let go of you. Tried and Have you had a change of heart? Can we go back to the start? I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. I'll never let go of you. Tried and true. Tried and true.
Wanna do it all with you by my side. If you're in, meet me here tonight. Be brave and come along. I'll be alright. Promise we don't